The garden was the most beautiful place you could ever imagine. Roses bloomed in every color. Red like fire trucks, yellow like sunshine, pink like cotton candy. A fountain splashed in the middle, sending sparkles of water into the air. Birds sang in the tall trees. Butterflies danced from flower to flower. But 4 little boys sat completely still on a stone bench, and they couldn't hear any of it. Mason, Liam, Aiden, and Tyler Anderson were 7 years old. They looked exactly alike. Same brown eyes, same messy dark hair, same freckles across their noses. But something was terribly wrong. Their mouths stayed closed. Their eyes looked empty, like windows with no light inside. 2 years ago, everything changed. Their mother, Sarah, had been driving them home from school. It was raining hard. The windshield wipers went swish, swish, swish. Sarah was singing their favorite song, "You Are My Sunshine." The boys were laughing in the back seat, making silly faces at each other. Then came the screech of tires. A big truck slid across the wet road, spinning like a top. It crashed into their car with a sound so loud, so terrible, that the world seemed to explode. When the boys woke up in a hospital, their mother was gone forever, and they couldn't hear anything anymore. Not the doctors talking, not their father crying, not even their own voices. The silence swallowed them whole. Their father, James Anderson, was one of the richest men in the city. He owned tall buildings that touched the clouds. He had more money than most people could count in their whole lives. But all his money couldn't bring back his wife, and it couldn't make his sons hear again. James tried everything. He took the boys to the best doctors in the world. Doctors looked in their ears with tiny lights. They did tests with loud beeping machines. They checked their brains with special cameras that could see inside their heads. Every doctor said the same thing. There's nothing physically wrong. Their ears work perfectly. Something else is blocking the sound. One doctor with a kind face said, "Sometimes, Mr. Anderson, when terrible things happen, our brains try to protect us. Maybe your boys don't want to hear the world anymore. Maybe it hurts too much." James didn't understand. How could sadness make someone deaf? He hired speech therapists who came to the house every day. They tried to teach the boys to talk again, to read lips, to use their voices. But the children just stared with those empty eyes, moving their hands in simple signs they'd learned. They lived in a bubble of silence, far away from everyone. The big house felt like a tomb. James walked through the halls at night, listening to the echo of his own footsteps. Do you remember when the house had been full of noise, the boys running and shouting, Sarah laughing, music playing, doors slamming, toys crashing? Now it was so quiet he could hear his own heartbeat. He missed his sons. They were right there, eating breakfast, playing with toys, sleeping in their beds. But they felt like ghosts. They never smiled. They never hugged him. They lived in their world of silence. And he couldn't reach them. James had fired 17 nannies in 2 years. Some were too strict. Some were too silly. Some got frustrated when the boys didn't respond. Some were scared of the silence. None of them could reach his children. Then Grace Okafor arrived. She showed up on a rainy Tuesday morning, carrying a small bag and wearing a bright yellow raincoat. She was 25 years old, with dark skin that glowed like polished wood and eyes that sparkled with something James hadn't seen in a long time. "Hope, I'm here about the nanny position," she said with a smile that seemed to light up the gray day. James looked at her resume. She wasn't fancy. She hadn't worked for rich families. She'd grown up poor in a tiny village far away. She'd taken care of her 7 younger brothers and sisters. She'd never been to college. She had no special degrees. "Why do you think you can help my sons when 17 other nannies couldn't?" James asked, his voice tired and sad. Grace looked him straight in the eyes. "Because I don't think they're broken, Mr. Anderson. I think they're hiding. And I know how to find children who are hiding." Something in her voice made James want to believe her. Maybe it was because he was desperate. Maybe it was because her smile reminded him a little bit of Sarah's. Maybe it was because he had nothing left to lose. "You can start tomorrow," he said. That night, James stood at his bedroom window, looking down at the garden where his sons sat like statues. The fountain splashed. The wind rustled the leaves. Somewhere, a cricket chirped. His boys heard none of it. James pressed his hand against the cold glass and whispered, "Please, Grace, please bring them back to me." He didn't know that tomorrow everything would begin to change. He didn't know that Grace had a wild, impossible idea. He didn't know that she would do something no doctor, no therapist, no expert had ever thought to try. He didn't know that sound could be felt instead of heard. And he didn't know that his sons were about to wake up. Grace's first morning started like all the others had for the boys. They sat at the breakfast table, eating pancakes without tasting them, staring at nothing. The cook had made them into smiley faces with blueberry eyes and strawberry mouths, but the boys didn't smile back. Grace didn't try to make them talk. She didn't wave her hands in front of their faces. She didn't do any of the things the other nannies had done. Instead, she sat down and started eating her own pancakes. Then she did something strange. She hummed. She hummed so loud that her whole chest shook. She could feel the vibration rumbling through her body like a purring cat. She pressed her hand to her throat while she hummed, feeling it buzz against her palm. Tyler, the smallest of the four boys, looked up. His eyes weren't quite so empty anymore. They were curious. Grace kept humming. Then she reached across the table and gently took Tyler's small hand. She placed it on her throat. Tyler's eyes went wide. He could feel something. The humming traveled from Grace's throat into his fingers, up his arm, into his chest. It was like a tickle inside his body. It was like magic. Mason, Liam, and Aiden stopped eating. They were watching now. Grace smiled and hummed louder. She took each boy's hand, one by one, and let them feel the vibration in her throat. Their faces changed. Something was waking up behind their eyes. After breakfast, Grace said, "Let's go to the garden." The boys followed her outside. The sun was shining. The roses were blooming. The fountain was splashing. But the boys heard nothing, felt nothing, cared about nothing. Grace pulled out a long green garden hose. She turned on the water. It sprayed out in a silver stream, making rainbows in the sunlight. "Come here, my darlings," Grace said, even though she knew they couldn't hear her words. She made the water spray go up and down in a rhythm, like a heartbeat, like a drum. Splash, 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 splash. Then she started to sing. "Rain, rain, go away, come again another day." She sang it loud and strong, and as she sang, she moved the water to match her song. When her voice went high, the water went high. When her voice went low, the water went low. Splash, 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 splash. The boys stood watching, getting wet, not caring. But Grace didn't stop. She kept singing. She kept making the water dance. And then she did something incredible. She pointed the hose at the ground near the boys' feet. The water hit the stone path and sent vibrations through the ground. The boys could feel in their toes, traveling up their legs. Descendez. Little children want to play rain, rain, go away. Tyler stepped closer. He put his bare foot right where the water was hitting the ground. The vibration shot through his foot, up his leg, into his whole body. His mouth opened in surprise. Grace saw it. Her heart started beating faster. She kept singing, kept spraying, kept making the rhythm match her voice. Tyler put his hand on his own chest. He could feel something there, too. When Grace's voice was loud, his chest felt different. When the water splashed, his feet felt different. It was like the world was talking to him in a new language, a language he could feel instead of hear. Liam came closer. Then Aiden. Then Mason. All four boys stood in the spray of the water, getting soaked, their small hands on their chests, their feet on the vibrating ground. Grace kept singing, tears running down her face mixing with the water spray. Rain, rain, go away, come again another day. And then it happened. Tyler opened his mouth, and a sound came out. Just a tiny sound, barely there. It was the first sound any of the boys had made in 2 years. Grace dropped the hose. Water sprayed everywhere. She fell to her knees and pulled Tyler into her arms, hugging him tight. She was crying and laughing at the same time. Tyler put his small hand on Grace's chest again. He could feel her crying. He could feel her heartbeat. He could feel her happiness shaking through her whole body. From the house, James Anderson stood at the window, watching. He saw his son make a sound. He saw Grace hugging Tyler. He saw the other three boys touching their own chests, their own throats, confusion and wonder on their faces. James ran outside so fast he almost tripped. "What happened? What did you do?" Grace looked up at him, her face shining with joy and water and tears. "They can feel sound, Mr. Anderson. They can't hear it with their ears, but they can feel it with their whole bodies. The vibrations, the water hitting the ground, my voice making the air move, the rumbling in my chest when I hum. They can feel all of it." James didn't understand, but the doctors said... The doctors were looking at their ears, Grace said. But sound isn't just in the ears. Sound is vibration. It moves through air, through water, through ground, through our bodies. Your boys' ears might not work right now because of what happened to them, but their bodies can still feel the vibrations that sound makes. James knelt down next to his sons. Tyler was still touching his own chest, still making that small sound, feeling it was inside himself. "Show me," James whispered. Grace took James's hand and placed it on Tyler's small chest. Then she hummed again, loud and strong. James felt his son's chest vibrate in response to Grace's voice. It was like Tyler's body was a drum, and Grace's voice was a drumstick. "They're not broken," Grace said softly. "They're just listening in a different way now. We have to teach them that this feeling, this vibration, is sound. We have to help them connect the dots." That afternoon, Grace did something else that seemed crazy. She found an old recording of Sarah singing lullabies. James had hidden it away because it hurt too much to listen to. Grace played it on a speaker, not a regular speaker, but one with heavy bass that made the whole room shake. She turned it up loud. The boys felt the vibrations in the floor and the walls, in their bones. And then Sarah's voice filled the room, turned into vibrations, turned into something the boys could feel deep inside their bodies. "Hush, little baby. Don't say a word. Mama's going to buy you a mockingbird." Tyler started crying. Not sad crying, remembering crying. He put both hands on his chest, feeling his mother's voice traveling through his body like a warm hug from far away. Then Aiden started crying. Then Liam. Then Mason. All four boys stood there, tears running down their faces, feeling their mother's voice for the first time in 2 years. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't hearing, not really, but it was something. It was a door opening. It was the first ray of light breaking through 2 years of darkness. James pulled all four of his sons into his arms, holding them tight, while Sarah's voice vibrated through the room. Grace stood nearby, her hand over her heart, knowing that this was just the beginning. The silence was cracking. The walls were coming down. And 4 little boys were starting to find their way back home. The next morning, James made phone calls to every expert he could find. But this time, he wasn't looking for regular doctors. He was looking for people who understood vibration, sound waves, and how the body could feel music. Within 3 days, special equipment arrived at the Anderson mansion. There were platforms that shook and rumbled when music played through them. There were headphones that didn't go in the ears but pressed against the bones behind the ears, sending vibrations straight into the skull. There were speakers so powerful they could make the whole floor dance. There were even special vests that turned sound into gentle buzzing all over the chest and back. The garden became a laboratory of miracles. Grace worked with the boys every single day. She would sing, and they would put their hands on her throat. She would play drums, and they would feel the boom, boom, boom in their bellies. She would stomp her feet, and they would feel the rhythm traveling up from the ground. But the biggest breakthrough came 2 weeks later. James sat on the vibrating platform with Tyler in his lap. Grace had set up the bone conduction headphones on Tyler's head, pressing gently against the bones behind his ears. James took a deep breath. Then he spoke, his voice being turned into vibrations that traveled through Tyler's skull bones, straight into his inner ear where sound lives. "I love you, Tyler," James said. Tyler's eyes went wide, wider than they'd ever been. His mouth opened. His hands flew to the headphones, pressing them harder against his head. He had felt his father's words. Not perfectly, not clearly, but he had felt them in a way that was closer to hearing than anything else in 2 years. Tyler looked up at his father's face. He watched James's lips move. He felt the vibrations in his skull. And somewhere deep in his brain, something connected. The, Tyler whispered. James started sobbing. He held his son so tight, repeating over and over, "Yes, yes, Daddy's here, Daddy's here." Grace was crying too. And so were Mason, Liam, and Aiden, who were watching their brother wake up. The therapist Grace had found came to the house every day. They were special therapists who knew how to teach children to understand vibrations as language. They knew that the boys' brains needed to relearn how to process sound, but through a different pathway. They played games where the boys had to feel different rhythms and match them to pictures. Slow vibrations meant elephant. Fast vibrations meant rabbit. High vibrations meant bird. Low vibrations meant lion. The boys started connecting the vibrations they felt to the world around them. Every afternoon, Grace took them to the garden with the water hose. It was their special time. She would sing "Rain, Rain, Go Away," and the boys would stand in the spray, feeling the music in their feet, in their hands, in their chests. One day, Mason started singing with her. His voice was shaky and strange because he couldn't hear himself. But he was trying. He was making sounds again. Then Liam joined in. His voice was different, higher, but was there. Then Aiden, whose voice came out as a whisper, but a whisper is still a voice. And Tyler, the smallest, the bravest, who had made the first sound. He sang the loudest of all. "Rain, rain, go away. Come again another day." James watched from the window, his hand over his mouth, trying not to cry so hard that he couldn't see. His sons were singing. His silent sons were making music. The real magic happened 3 months after Grace arrived. The family therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Chun, suggested they try something powerful. She asked James to record himself talking to the boys about their mother, to tell them stories about Sarah, happy stories, using the bone conduction headphones, so the boys could feel his words. James sat in the garden with all 4 boys. Each one wore their special headphones. Grace sat nearby, ready to help. "Your mother," James began, his voice shaking, "loved you more than anything in the whole world. She used to sing to you every night before bed. She would tuck you in, one by one, and sing the same lullaby." The boys felt his words vibrating through their skulls. They watched his face, reading his lips, putting together the feeling words with the mouth shapes. She would sing, "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." And then James started to sing Sarah's lullaby. His voice was rough and broken, not beautiful like hers had been, but it was full of love. Something incredible happened. Tyler's eyes closed. A single tear rolled down his cheek. And then, very softly, he started to sing with his father. "Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird." His voice was quiet and wobbly, but he remembered the words. Somewhere deep in his mind, where trauma had locked him away, the memories were still there. The vibrations had found the key. One by one, the other boys joined in, for broken voices and one father's voice, all singing together in the garden where sound had once disappeared. They weren't hearing perfectly. Some frequencies were easier than others. High sound were harder. Low sound were clearer. But they were processing vibrations as language, as music, as connection. They were healing. 6 months after Grace arrived, the garden was full of sound again. The boys laughed, real loud, joyful laughs. They shouted to each other when they played. They argued about toys. They sang songs with Grace. They told their father they loved him. And even though their words were sometimes unclear, James understood every single one. They could hear the fountain splashing, though it sounded muffled and far away. They could hear birds singing, though they couldn't catch every note. They could hear rain falling on the leaves, though it sounded different than it did before the accident. It wasn't perfect hearing, but it was their hearing, their new way of experiencing the world. And the silence, the terrible silence that had swallowed them whole, it was gone. Grace had done what no one expected. She hadn't fixed them with expensive medicine or fancy surgery. She had reminded them that sound is more than just something you hear with your ears. Sound is vibration. Sound is feeling. Sound is connection. She had taught 4 lost boys that there are many ways to listen and many ways to be heard. One evening, James found Grace packing her small bag. His heart stopped. "You're leaving?" he asked, panic in his voice. Grace smiled. "Your boys don't need me anymore, Mr. Anderson. They need their father. They need their regular life back. They need to go to school and make friends and be normal kids again. But I'll visit," Grace promised. "But they're not hiding anymore. You found them. Or really, they found their way back." James hugged her tight. "Thank you," he whispered. "You gave me my sons back." "No," Grace said gently. "They were always there. I just helped you all learn a new language. The language of vibration. The language of feeling. The language of love." That night, James tucked his 4 sons into bed, one by one. He kissed each forehead. He told each boy he loved them, and they told him they loved him back. Their voices were different than before. Some words were hard. Some sounds were tricky. But every word was precious. Every word was a miracle. In the garden outside, the fountain splashed. The wind rustled the leaves. The crickets chirped. And 4 little boys, sleeping peacefully in their beds, could feel it all. Sometimes healing doesn't come from where we expect. Sometimes the answer isn't in fancy medicine or expensive treatments. Sometimes it comes from a person with a kind heart and a crazy idea. Sometimes it comes from remembering that we can connect in ways we never imagined. Grace taught the Anderson family that love can be felt even when it can't be heard. That sound lives in our whole bodies, not just our ears. That trauma can be healed with patience, creativity, and hope. If this story touched your heart, like this video to help others find it. Share it with someone who needs to remember that healing takes many forms. And subscribe so you never miss stories about the incredible power of human connection and the miracles that happen when we refuse to give up on the people we love. Because sometimes the most important sounds aren't the ones we hear. They're the ones we feel.